Today, we are 13,000 Nunavimmiut living in a homeland that's rapidly changing. To make for a better future for us all, let us look at what we're doing to secure our language, our culture, and our full inherent rights within Canada. For thousands of years, Indigenous people in Canada lived according to their own needs and traditions. Inuit were self-reliant, in control of their lives and their destiny. When European colonizers arrived, they took control and squeezed Indigenous people onto tiny parcels of the land. Inuit were among the last to lose control of their land and their lives. And now the time has come to get it back. Here is the story of how we in Nunavik are working to make that happen. In part 1 of this episode, we saw how Nunavimmiut struggled to make governments fully respect the James Bay Agreement, and how we tried to unite in our efforts to do so. Now it's time to pick up the pace. After 20 years of wrangling with the Quebec government, we gradually got more money, better services. But at the same time, we became enmeshed in a system of government that did not recognize our needs. We were less and less in control of our lives. One problem was, we Inuit did not speak with one voice.
Avisi managilak si Mayavut, Nunavimmiut chuta Inuktitut. Aitian nakullo ammalo Inuktitut hatigin ng atenyan kiwa engulok si Mayuking unego makifimuin ng tao si Mayok.
When we ceded the right to our land in the James Bay Agreement, 1/3 of our people did not agree. They did not recognize the agreement. They formed the ITN. The ITN elders wanted to protect Inuit language and way of life. They believed the James Bay Agreement would let the white man control the Inuit homeland, leaving Inuit behind. They went to court to cancel the agreement.
Kawamataon nakatut Inuit aulatangan ng tan matulingah tasimaro sakkusniyo na yun.
Over the years we tried and tried again to come back together, but something always got in the way.
Avisi manivut isumay na aluatok daw hatta si Mayok day kwa Aitian nakunni sa pumisimalaki mata Quebec ka makut. Avigo malak matalo pikujala ikatwibikut chigo malak matalo sa puminyang ipinalaki hatta lauk siya mata. Uhumay tuwalo si Mayok.
Over the years, Inuit held on to the vision of self-government and getting back the land. But the Nunavik Commission, where we met with Ottawa and Quebec, became focused on improving administration. Finally, in 2010, there was an agreement with the two governments to be approved by a referendum. Our chief negotiators reached out to explain.
kamahati unatin lang ataktur ataw singunong kaw magusibut aul tawusibut aul chigu magusibut temet yung tikitu na katalta amalo al sunal ni ke biro al siwunong mitiyud taman na akotik yung kasibut si marabut karusilang tigo bikinaktirnik allo-alluta. Bikinaktirnik allo-alluta.
Ataw singutitaw ni nga ako taw tilugu kavamamig iniksiga sa waktu.
In the end, Nunavimmiut were not convinced. 2 out of 3 rejected the agreement.
Taina amisukana ni iulita hammat ang katigigutiwas loh si Mayok. Kisiani tanda kisiani giyangit takuyalaw tigilaw si Makit ilawngit luwi Inuit kaumat sa Nunavik takuumat yangit tuit uhaw sibo ilok ko sibo 55 hulani ilaw niyang ito akpa aulat sigum na ng tanda li takutigilakit si Mayakan namin.
As we tried to pick up the pieces, Quebec came up with Plan Nord. It was a scheme to exploit more mineral resources across northern Quebec. We were never consulted. We responded with Plan Nunavik, better known as the Nunavimmiut.
Uko hausi wallo hattalok si mayut Nunavut isimay nakani talino upinakani taman na nunagigatigo humayok si ubigot si ulo inugaswak bigatigo taan na pimmakialolok si mayok hausi but taman Inuktitut na pimmakialo titaw misuni akito yung miyong univut.
The Nunavimmiut was real grassroots democracy, but real change had to come both in Nunavik and across Canada before we could see clearly the road ahead toward Inuit self-determination. Indigenous Canadians have had to be patient when it comes to having their rights recognized, or even discussed. When the last constitutional conference failed to achieve anything in 1987, the politicians turned their backs. While we in Nunavik struggled to make the James Bay Agreement work, in the rest of Canada there were land claims negotiations, court cases, and then a Royal Commission on Aboriginal People. There was a brief flash of light in 2005. The Liberal government and the provincial premiers agreed on a program to spend $5 billion on education, employment, and housing for Indigenous people outside Quebec.
Aboriginal leaders say the goal here is for Aboriginal people to find their place in Canada and become equal partners in its prosperity.
Poverty among First Nations can be eliminated.
But the question of inherent rights and self-government was kept off the table. And in any case, the deal died when the Conservative Party won the election a few months later. And for the following nearly 10 years, the Conservative governments of Stephen Harper put any talk of Indigenous rights on ice, even as Canada's colonial legacy came into focus. Finally, in 2015, there was a change at the top.
What's needed is nothing less than a total renewal of the relationship between Canada and First Nations peoples.
Everyone in that audience heard the magic word, reconciliation.
The constitutionally guaranteed rights of First Nations in Canada are not an inconvenience, but a sacred obligation.
But where do you start on that road?
The conversations about reconciliation have to address what do Aboriginal land rights and resource rights look like today, and what does Aboriginal governance look like today? And that's a long and complicated conversation that requires input from all parties.
That looks like heavy lifting, but before long, others decided to seize the time.
Tibur lime saliwang bunga. Hauji magatsiunin. Ati ano kagalapi ka sa atuyan tunga. Kubiyas sungal utama nga. Ay si Mayo inunik. Ay may liyo mayakpal ta kisiyan yung
Nearly all the organizations that represent Nunavimmiut are in the room. After 50 years of fighting for Inuit rights, 34 as a senator in Ottawa, Charlie Watt is elected Makivik president for the third time.
Mittok pitcho tikit sugu utilok tuyunga ukwa ang nakatigi utitara si Malayagayabot ipigi sore kita ikang pigi alilok si matsuta tay mangan piyagay may tok kutigi sore kit amisut pitcho tikit luwin.
This will be the first of 3 such meetings, broadcast live on TNI. It gives Makivik the mandate to negotiate with Ottawa about land rights and Inuit self-determination, 2 pillars of reconciliation and a platform to unite all Nunavimmiut behind a common goal. The discussion tells us how much is at stake in our daily lives, an echo of the Nunavimmiut. Eight months later, a second assembly takes a seat. The quest for self-determination takes a big step forward.
Tamakwa pinasuak ni bud yung anibud kingwatin tumitiging asyak tuwinay takurawi halangan mata.
On the agenda is a proposal to create a Nunavik constitution and elected assembly. It's a big step.
Lukisiani ulang atsuti ni wang nakaya katalang ayusi wultin nunalini kisiani kawamaul namini inuluta kawamahal doakota tukisi mahatiin ni sa ulang ayu down ni Quebec City mi tukita ti ulang atang ituit kutwa nunaling asuna mikingo mat sila kin mga uwagut email lang ayu mitaku mabuk.
The government in Ottawa, struggling to make good on its promise of reconciliation, is given notice. And 6 months later, it comes on board.
With our cultural approach, our Inuit way of doing things, I think we have a lot of those answers. And
Here, finally, after endless detours and denials, Ottawa signed on to the right of Nunavimmiut to form our own government.
It's ever been done and looked at serious enough in the past before. That is to trying to come up with a governing structure in such a way that will be operating on the Inuit law, rather than being driven by the 2 existing laws like federal jurisdictions, the federal government, and we know that we still have to work with those 2 instruments.
It opens a new chapter in our history, an effort to define our place as full citizens of Canada and Quebec today.
So we have a work cut out for us to trying to come up with a governing structure in such a way that will be operating on the Inuit law. Moving ahead into establishing a governing structures based on the Inuit value. There we are.
There we are. Nunavimmiut wattina pensuak tau simalangman tiliau gutigilau yakani upigus siatunga tana upigit siasugu pinasuahattataga.
The ball is now in our court. Creating a Nunavik constitution is a challenge. The Third Assembly debates the meaning of an ethnic Inuit government. Who is a citizen? Must they be a fluent Inuktitut speaker? Must they reside in Nunavik?
tamanilirama pinastiosungainu ni pirot isunga poyortoteillarialurearporot.
This is the hard work of preparing for self-determination. Define how we can best govern ourselves once free of the colonial straitjacket.
Nunavimmiut inutuinna Nunavimmiut hanuilorunnaw tinginnik.
Isumamiut lang mataltek ko katingalu akka we hatsikana si malakpatapigun na sitsakatakoting takko ninga itirumayuyun.
There's enthusiasm and apprehension. Important issues need more discussion. But at the end, the task force that prepared the proposal is set aside. Questions are left hanging. But to fight for self-determination, we must be united. While we Nunavimmiut discuss our future, a reckoning is brewing across Canada. Systemic discrimination of Indigenous people makes headline news. Lisa Hopequaluk was part of the inquiry into missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls.
Mamisa humayunod. Hanuing isiyang ni mulo, iloko sa katsiyan ng mulo.
Ikalunnulo, Happy Valley Goose Bay mulo, amisukalali Inuit, Pani haksuti anana haksuti luni, ukuang iluni, Inuktitut, Pitiluit, unikah tasutik, tukistitsyu tikitsuo, hanularik, tananaligiyangai, tuhun ni mangat.
The stories they tell point to a fundamental injustice. It's about our rights.
Tukisiliyo migutik yuasugulo, Inuit nunangan ni ako ninyalong aulat si laringinatta, ako ninyalo aulat si laringinatta, inusit tinig, turago marat tinig, tigumel larigata.
Soon, Canada's colonial legacy was in the spotlight.
Reinforcing the BC Supreme Court injunction issued December 31st, 2019.
One incident after another showed Indigenous rights being trampled on.
Keep your hands to yourself. We need to recognize our place and support our community as allies.
The land back movement came into focus. The stories connect to a larger awareness of injustice, and this time non-Indigenous Canadians joined the protest in large numbers.
Taman naman na at siging ito ditaw na akhiya niriyang halunatitut equality hangito ulumi. Tay ko nui si mayangit kawo makut maligalia si mayangit malititaw suta uvahut namminek isumagiyat tinik nuitsi taw kayang ito yak suta piyo sa hakpiyo hatta si magatta taman nakhiya niriyang tahat sutik nuna kasi mayoy adlaw pata inyo pata nuitsivalang mata tamat suminga at tidigiya huy nagmik amisuilo halunato kislak paliat sutik at tiging iluak na kayang ipigot jaw na kayabot nuna kasi mayot suta sunalimani piukute hatsetlu halunat isukisyak luwit ubahut tamani nuna kasi mayot suta anak kasi matsuta sanak pataw si mayuyak panagayabot taima.
The time is right to press on with our fight for self-determination. And on that road, we are not alone.
We want the government to realize that we did have a government. Our government had everything. They had people that was looking after our resources. It's important that you get to know part of the history that we have the laws that we did have. And everything was broken by the white man. Everything.
Elsewhere in Canada, governments are no longer claiming rights to Indigenous land. Gary Yapsley has gone on to lead land claims negotiations for First Nations in British Columbia.
The white man's taking the land, the white man's taking the trees, the white man's taking the minerals, the white man's taking the water, the white man's imposing white man's government. And the question then is, what instruments have you got to fight against that?
The extent that the James Bay Agreement has release, cede, and surrender provisions in it, those are an anachronism. They belong in another century. They have nothing to do with reconciliation. And they are and should be, not just to the Inuit in Quebec, but to governments, they should be seen as offensive. There's not an end game here. This is an ongoing organic process. And we will adjust and learn as society changes and as our values change and as our understanding changes.
Our land has been inhabited for more than 4,000 years. People survived by hunting and fishing. They lived off the land, as we have done until recent times. That's our inherent right, and that's what we must get back through negotiating with Ottawa and Quebec. 2020 was a year no one could have predicted. The COVID pandemic demanded all our attention. And there was an election which saw Pita Atami replace Charlie Watt as Makivik president. But our quest for self-determination has kept moving forward. First, we must agree on how we will govern our homeland. Makivik met with all the organizations to set up a process of consultation and transparency.
Kava maharumanivut, pihudaliorun na tumidlo kava maharumanivut. Pivarlia simayu yang ikaluaksuni kisiani pivarlia simayu. Nunavimmiut immaha ipinaksisimang ikaluaksuni kisiani tamakwatimiuyuit aulatangit. Hanutak kunga Inuit kava magilangayanganut ilang mangata ambalo hanuilingalang mangata ang hatigi utiugi hangin na tugaluak tanalo uhak biyuak sauyok Nunavimmiut kava mangata init sanga nuigia halang mesuni tamakkogaluak tilugit tay mailingagia hagaluak tilugit kisiani ulumitaman na ang hatigi suwang neo hattanertok atokuta kilangalang mejabun.
It's the hard work of reconciliation, and it goes hand in hand with another challenge. Get Ottawa and Quebec to return our inherent right to the land.
Taman naman na matpigil lakittabut sakkuisti taunarasimayavut nunattinik kutinlu anaqqatni sakkuisti tausimagatain hatiginni ulaqsimayamut unalo uqausiiartasimatsugu maligasi piqhuiasi malitsimayavut uvattinilluuni apiqsuyagasi unnaqita latsagasi imailulangavut ukuninga haitsilangavut taimailoqtausimaneriyavut tillisimanermi piusihaqvigutigivagakku governmentut tamainnu kupaikkunut governmentohakkunlu tigumialeriqsusi tamatsuminga Nunavik aqsaanisimagatsi tamannauteqtigiartasi tillisimaneriyasi.
It's been nearly 50 years since those hunters from Inuit and Puvelnituk drove their skidoos to Quebec City and asked the Premier for self-government. Like most Nunavimmiut at the time, they took it for granted that the land was ours and we would run our own affairs. Today we live in a different world, every corner connected to the rest. We have better houses and more services than the generations before us, but less control of how we live. Inuit need to heal. Families must come together. New generations must come on board to take care of the land that nurtures us and makes us who we are. That is how we will build our Inuit homeland.